Okay. Lovely. So welcome everybody for the second in our series, looking at the Rosh Hashanah prayers and customs, and followed by Yom Kippur in a couple of weeks' time. Last week we had an introduction, background to Rosh Hashanah, and I hope that put a few things into perspective. And today we're going to just look at the prayers, really. It's not going to be heavy. There's a lot of prayers, but we're not going to delve into the depth, mystical depths, but we're going to try and make sure that everyone, especially those people who are not going to be in shul, has got a fighting chance of having a meaningful Rosh Hashanah. Because, as I was just saying, we still don't know what's going to happen, because our dear government and their dear Corona committee keep meeting, and I'm sure you've been following it like me. They keep having arguments, and they can't decide what they're going to do. So the first problem they had was with the Uman situation, and that was solved by the people of Oman, who have forbidden Israelis to go there. That's quite a good way of dealing with that problem. The second problem is going to be shuls, and of course they're under great pressure to open up the shuls and have hundreds and hundreds of people, and I suppose that was not a good idea. So we'll have to wait and see. But on the assumption that many of us will be, at least some of the time, working, or should I say, davening from home, then I hope this will help, because on the day, you're not going to have anyone else to point you in the right direction. So let's do a bit of screen sharing, and I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, gone. Screen share is gone. Screen share is here. So this is my little chart that we did. This was the heading, of course, of some of the customs, rules, and prayers of the yamim Noraim, and then should we say yamim? Yamim. Right. Then we have what we did last week. We looked at the Rosh Hashanah overview, month of Elul, Psalm 27, shofar blowing, and Slichot. We've done all that, and now we're going to move on to this. History and background with that, we did that last week. The machzor, the davening. Hold on, I just have to let a couple of people in. The machzor, the davening, the okay. And the first day is what we're going to look at. Starting with well, in fact, we're going to start before the evening service, so we'll go a bit before that. Morning service, the laning, the haftarah, no shofar blowing, so that's we're not doing this week. We'll look at that next week. Musaf service and the afternoon service. I'm just going to close this window because we've got some noisy machines outside. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this screen. And I'm going to bring up a machzor. I hope. Yep. Let's just make that a bit bigger. So here we have a copy of the machzor. If you've got yours, we'll try and help you go through using the one that you're used to, or at least one case, someone has just bought a new one. I'm going to be looking at the Koren. I've got here the machzor Koren, which is an Ashkenazi one, which is not really what we do in our shul. And then I've also got an English edition of the art scroll. But on the board here, we've got, just move this out of the way, hold on. We've got the one that from Sefaria, which is the Rosh Hashanah Matzah for Sepharad. First of all, I want to just have a few words about this word and this book, the Machzor. Okay, just to, why is it called a Matzah? Why is it, what's the difference between a Matzah and a Siddur? So at first, when the prayer book started out, they were either called a Siddur or a Matzah, and everything was in it because prayers were relatively straightforward. The weekday, the Shabbat prayers, the festivals, and even Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But as time went on, they added in so many different prayers and poems, and it got very confusing. And so the Siddur and the Matzah became differentiated. The Siddur became the traditional name for the prayer book for the regular prayers, and the Matzah is the one for the festivals. And although it's mainly used now for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, there are, of course, Machzorim around for each festival. But to be honest, it's all in the ordinary Siddur apart, but not for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Machzor, of course, means, it comes from the root chazar, lachzor, to like a cycle, to go round and round, because obviously that is what happens with the calendar. So in our matzah, I want to ask you a question actually. In our matzah and our siddur, if you haven't got, let's say you've lost the cover of your book that you're opening up, and you are, and all the top line has gone, so you really don't know what book you're looking at. But you turn to the first bit of the prayers, the first prayer in the book you're using. How do you know straight away that you're either using a matzah or a siddur? Anyone want a very simple answer to a simple question? How would you know if it's a matzah or a siddur if all the marks have disappeared? Any ideas? If you've got an idea, you can just unmute yourself and say it. Otherwise, I will have to tell you. But the answer is...
Matzah usually starts with the Mincha and Mariv, and Siddur starts with Shacharit.
Perfect. Absolutely right. So not quite sure why, but that is how it always seems to work. Your Siddur starts with the morning prayer. The Matzah starts with the afternoon prayer for that particular festival. So that makes some sense because that's when the festival is starting. The Siddur to start in the morning, I suppose it also makes sense, start in the morning, even though the Jewish day, as we know, starts in the evening. So that's just a little by the way. So now we're going to start flying through the Siddur. And the first thing we come to on page 11 of my Koren, if that helps, is the lighting for the candles for Rosh Hashanah. So that's before Mincha in the book. Lighting of the candles for Rosh Hashanah, let's just pass all these things, is of course very similar to Shabbat and very similar to Yom Tov. Well, this is Yom Tov, to the other Yom Tovim, and it's the bracha you say beforehand. This year, because it's on Friday night, first day, it's V'tzivanu lahadlek ner shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov. We don't mention the word Rosh Hashanah. We just call it Yom Tov. And we follow it, of course, with the bracha for Shehechianu. And Shehechianu is, here we go, lighting the candles. Shehechianu, we say nothing to do with the candles, but it's because we've got a new festival, and therefore we like to say Shehechianu on all these new occasions. So just to remind those of you who are going to be watching on Zoom, because I believe the Shul is going to try and do a Friday night Zoom again for Rosh Hashanah. And I don't think anyone's mentioned, but we do have to remember that we've had instructions on how to deal with our computer because we bring in Shabbat halfway through the service. And it's also important to remember, of course, to light the candles at that point. So just before Mariv, when we say the Shir for Shel Shabbat, we have to make sure that by then we have lit the candles. That's quite important, otherwise you miss the boat and you won't be able to do it. Then we go to Mincha. So we're going to not look at Mincha because Mincha is the normal afternoon service. So if you're in your own machzor, skip through that until you come through to Mariv, which is the evening service when we start. Mariv, here we go. Now this year's Friday night, and causes a few interesting points. We've already had one Yom Tov not that long ago, which was on a Friday night. I can't remember which one it was, but we need to remember that we miss out the Kabbalat Shabbat. Now, if you're using pure Ashkenazi book, it misses it out completely. But if you are using the one that our shuls use, which is the Sepharad one, we say a little bit. We say Mizmor, the David. We say Hanabakoach, if you say that, and we say Lechadodi, selected verses. We just say Lechadodi, Shamor v'Zachor, Likrat Shabbat, Yamin Usmo, and Boi v'Shalom. So that's, I think, less than half of it. Just to have a token welcoming in of Shabbat. At that point, the end of Lachadodi is when we bring in Shabbat officially. Well, it's officially, when I say officially, the official time is, of course, whatever is published on the calendars. But you've always got these extra minutes, haven't you? 18 minutes, whatever it is. And that means by the time you get to Mizmor Yom HaShabbat, you are definitely now coming into Shabbat. And that is the point where, if you are at the early minyan, you should have lit your candles by then. And that's the end of Kabbalat Shabbat. Very short and sweet. Then we say Kaddish, the first Kaddish of the new year. And this is the mourner's Kaddish, but we have to then immediately remember that we add in some words in our every single Kaddish from now on, whether it's the reader's Kaddish or a mourner's Kaddish. We add in here we are, La'ela, Ula'ela. Normally it's just La'ela, if you can see on my screen or in your own machzor. And we change it to La'ela, Ula'ela. There's a huge discussion, I mean, can you believe it? Well, you can, about whether it should be La'ela, La'ela, or it should be La'ela, Ula'ela. And some people say one and some people say the other. So the Koreners put it down as U. But when I was in England, we were told, no, you mustn't say U. And why do we do it? All it is talking about God as being up high, and it's just emphasizing I mean, it's a little weird, and I haven't really found a very good answer as to why punkt, that word is repeated, whereas any other number of words could be changed. Also, we say Oseh Hashalom, the hey at the beginning of that line. Okay, who makes the peace? Again, it's not 100% clear to me anyway. If anyone knows better, please let me know why we add in just that particular letter and say Hashalom, but we do. And you have to remember that for the 10 days, starting on the first day of Rosh Hashanah and ending at the end of Yom Kippur. Now, Mariv, actually, I don't know if you remember when we used to be in England, in particular, the shul was really crowded on the first night of Rosh Hashanah. Lots of people came. Obviously, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it was the shul was jam-packed full, and we know that on the second day it's already not so full. But it was always a bit of a strange event to me to see so many people on the first night of Rosh Hashanah, because not much goes on. And I just got this theory that is because people think, it's Rosh Hashanah, it must be a really big special service on the evening of Rosh Hashanah, a bit like Kol Nidre, but it really isn't. It's a very short, sharp, straightforward service, very similar to the normal one for Friday night. We start with the Shema, and we carry on through. We add in the special bits for Shabbat, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael, as normal. And we also add in, just before the Amida, on Mariv Amida, let me just see where we are on in my Koren. Yeah, on page 61 in the Ashkenazi version, which probably doesn't help many of you, but if it does, good. We add in this line, Tiku v'chodesh shofar b'keser liyom chagenu, ki chok liYisrael hu mishpat lelohei Yaakov. And we add that in, which is sound the shofar on the new moon. Remember, we talked about this last week. On our feast day, when the moon is hidden, because as we know, the first day of Rosh Hashanah is new moon, when there is no moon. For it is a statute for Israel, an ordinance of the God of Jacob. And just like V'shamru v'nei Israel, this forms the morning kiddush before we have our wine and our snack after shul. V'shamru v'nei Israel, plastiku v'chodesh are the words we say for the morning kiddush. And then we go into our Amida. Now, the good news is the Mariv Amida is used, or the same words are going to appear for the morning service and the afternoon service, which means there's not so much to learn further about them other than what we're going to do now. The Amida follows the same pattern as the other festivals, which is to say, and every day of the week, really, which is to say the first 3 brachot and the last 3 brachot are the same, although there are a couple of subtle variations of which we'll look at on Rosh Hashanah. But basically, they're the same brachot, the 3 introductory ones and the 3 final ones. And then on festivals and Shabbat, we stick 1 bracha in the middle, which talks about the day itself, the actual festival. On weekdays, of course, we have a total of 19 blessings. We have 3 at the beginning, 3 at the end, which is 6, and we have 13 in the middle, which go through a whole list of requests and this and that, do this, do that, when we're really asking God for everything. On Rosh Hashanah, like other festivals, and on Shabbat, God is resting like everyone else, so we don't actually ask him too overtly to do anything, because he's entitled to a day off as well. Really, though, it's sort of that rule is broken a bit on Rosh Hashanah, because we do end up asking him for quite a lot, even on Shabbat. Now, if you've got it in your book, fine, but it may be easy to follow here, I don't know. We start with Baruch Atah Hashem Eloheinu v'le'avoteinu, and this is, of course, we don't repeat the Amida in the evening. This is all silent. So whether you're at home or in shul, you'll say exactly the same as we're looking at here. And then we have to add in the phrases that we say on Rosh Hashanah. And normally we sing them during the day in the repetition, but we're not going to sing them in the evening service. So Zochreinu l'chaim melech hafetz v'chayim v'kotfeinu b'sefer hachayim l'mancha Elohim hayim. That's the first bit we add in, which means, remember us for life, O Lord, O King who desires life, and write us in the book of life, for your sake, O God of life. 2 things there then, or 3 things. Zochreinu. First of all, we're saying the word remember. Remember. And we spoke about that last week. We're going to speak about that again shortly. The next word is melech. We spoke about that last week. We're going to speak about it again a bit later. Melech, all the way through the service, the word Melech is going to pop up the whole time. And we ask God to write us into the book of life, okay? Which is what we want to happen. You know, there's these two books, the book of death and the book of life, and the really evil people go straight in the bad book, and the really, really good people go straight in the good book. But there's really none of them. So everyone basically is up for judging during this period, and God will decide. I read somewhere, was it in the Koran? I can't remember now. But what are we doing here? We're asking God. We're saying, write us in the book of life. And here we are on Shabbat, Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, two double things. Well, we know full well that we're not allowed to do any writing then, and why should God be allowed to do any writing then? So really, it's a bit of a chutzpah to ask someone to break Shabbat for our own needs. But then you have to remember that, well, what he's doing here is saving our lives by putting us in the book of life. He's saving our life. And since you're allowed to do anything to break Shabbat, break Yom Tov, in order to save a life, it's okay. We can encourage God to do some writing on Rosh Hashanah Shabbat. Okay, then we come to the next little interruption of the normal bit where we say, Mi kamocha avarachamim, zocheh yitzurav l'chayim berachamim. Okay, which means, who is like you, compassionate Father? Now we've moved away from Melech and we're talking about Av, Father. Zocheh yitzurav l'chayim berachamim. Zocher, remembering again, he remembers his creations, his creatures in compassion, barachamim, for life. So we stick these two extras in. Very, very frowned upon because we don't normally make any interruptions in the beginning of the Almeida, but it was deemed so important that all the objections were overturned, and there they are. And we say them in every single Amida for 10 days. And then we do something a bit strange on our Rosh Hashanah Amidot. We add in some phrases that we're not familiar with. Uvechein yitkadesh, uvechein tein pachtacha, uvechein tein kavod, uvechein tzadikim. Can you see that? All 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs beginning with uvechein. The connection is made there, apparently. It seems a bit unusual, but it is apparently. Uvechein is what happened in the book of Esther, when Esther has to go to the king. Remember that? She fasts and then she goes to the king, and even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. And in that sentence, she uses the word uvechein. And so, when I go to the king, even though it's against the law, if I perish, I perish. And the people, the rabbis who developed our prayers like that idea, because we're sort of in a similar position. We are going to God, a bit chutzpahdik, a bit illegal. He could just chuck us out the room and not listen to us, but we hope that he will. So they use that phrase, uvechein, 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 uvechein. And I wanted just to, uvechein tein pachtacha is an unusual phrase as well, which means the fear of you. Lifchod is to be frightened. Your fear of you, which actually connects up with Yitzchak. We'll look at that next week when we look at the laning. Just try and remember the word pachad, fear, and we'll see it in next week's laning. So there's a little connection with Yitzchak, who plays a big part in our Rosh Hashanah prayers. So having got those paragraphs out of the way, we then carry on really with the standard festival prayers. Nothing special. And we add in Ya'aleh v'Yavo. If you remember that, we say that on every festival, including Rosh Hashanah. And that's it. We come to the final three brachot, adding in a couple more verses. This one here, Uchetov l'chaim tovim kol b'nei v'ritecha. So now we're in the end section of the Amidah. Uchetov l'chaim tovim kol b'nei v'ritecha, which means, just find my place. Again, now I'm on page 75 in my Ashkenazi Koren. Uketov l'chaim tovim, which means, and it's like a command to God. We'll get a bit really stroppy here. Write for a good life, all the children of your covenant. So before we were talking about everyone, all these creations, and now we're really homing in on the Jewish people. Look, for goodness sake, just put us in the book of a good life. Very short and sharp. Uketov l'chaim tovim kol b'nei v'ritecha. And we do another funny thing here at the end. If you remember, we change the words at the end to say b'sefer chaim, or we add in, I should say, b'sefer chaim baracham v'shalom, ufanas ha'tova, u'gezerot tovot, yeshuot v'nechamot, nizakeh v'nikatev, v'fanecha, anachnu kol ha'am beit Yisrael chaim tovim u'l'shalom. So it's supposed to be, we're not asking God for anything, but here we go, asking him for everything. So please put us in the book of life. But while we're there, we may as well just be a bit more chutzpahdik and say, and baracha, and peace, and all parnasa, good income, yeah, and good decrees, and so we go on and on, asking God for everything. Well, why not? We hope he's listening to us. Nizakeh v'nekatev, so remember us and write us before you. So all the Jewish people, again, we've forgotten about the rest of the world, just us now. L'chaim tovim u'l'shalom, for a good life and for peace. There we are. That's the evening service. I forgot to say that at the end of the Mincha service, that's when we add in the David Hashem Ori. Remember that one? We looked at that last week. The psalm that we say all through till after Sukkot. So don't forget to say that after Mincha, the afternoon prayer, which you can say any time in the afternoon. Aleinu, we end up with as per normal, and Adan Olam, no, we don't say Adan Olam normally. Well, you can say Adan Olam, or those that say Yigdal, will say Yigdal. And then we say Lashana Tova Tikatev Techatein. That's the greeting. A Happy New Year. You should be written and sealed for a happy year. These are the different expressions for female, plural, and everything you need to know. So that's the evening service. Rosh Hashanah customs, if we have time next week, we will look at them. Now we're going to fly through to the morning service. If you want to find in your own book the morning service, please do. There's lots of extra bits here. But the morning prayer is putting on your talit. Everything is as per a normal Shabbat Yom Tov morning. So we're going to skip through all the prayers on getting up, the brachot, the Zukei, the Zimra. Now, of course, in Shul, we're using the Rosh Hashanah Nusach, the special tune for Rosh Hashanah. And and that goes all the way through the beginning bit before the proper chasm comes onto the stage. So keep moving. Instead, I came to the conclusion, by the way, when I was just doing a bit of preparation for this, and some of you who have been at home on previous occasions will probably agree with me that if you strip out going to shul and you strip out the really crowded shul, So it's quite an occasion. Everyone's dressed up. Everyone's chatting to each other. Oh, I haven't seen you for years, months, weeks. And you have a really nice chazan who's got a good voice and knows how to sing properly. And he really makes you feel it's a special day. If you strip all that away, Rosh Hashanah is sort of just another day, isn't it? So I think we have to make sure if we're going to be at home, and I don't know what I'm going to do yet, I don't know what the rules are going to be. And then when we know what the rules are going to be, I don't know what the shul's going to do. So we'll have to see. We just have to do something to make it a special day. So I suppose we have to dress up for Rosh Hashanah, even though no one's going to see us. And we have to try and do some singing ourselves. You don't have to do any singing, but it would be nice just to try and find a few tunes and make the day a bit special. You know, no one's going to expect anyone to go through the whole matzah on their own, but pick out the highlights, pick out the bits in big letters, which are always the important bits, and try and make something of it. I suppose that's all I can suggest. Well, here's a change. So at the end of Pezukei de Zimra, which is the first part of the service, just before the Chazan arrives, we stop it at a different place from normal. So normally, if it's on Shabbat, we stop just before Shochenad. Yes, you remember they change over who's doing the davening in Shul, and on Shabbat they start Shochenad, Marom, the Kadosh, well, that would be the Chazan. That's when Philip would normally start his singing if he's doing Shacharet. And if it's Yom Tov, we go back to here. But on Rosh Hashanah, the rabbi spotted something. It's a miracle. We've got this word that we love on Rosh Hashanah. HaMelech, God is the king. So we're going to start our service there. And of course, that is what happens. And over the years, it's developed that the Chazan makes a really big effort on this word. And think now, I was going to play it to you, but I'm not going to. If you want to have some memories of the davening, if you're not going to be in shul, of the nusach, of the tunes, then all you have to do is Google. If you put HaMelech in English, or morning service, whatever it is, nusach, or songs or tunes, anything like that, you'll find a whole range of Chazanim who have recorded their lovely voices, some more lovely than others, and you can listen to it, and it's quite nice. So HaMelech is a big place, and what happens, or what sometimes happens, is that the Chazan who is at his seat starts singing at his own seat. And while he's still sitting down, he goes, starts, and he moves, then he gets up and he moves to the bima, HaMelech, in a really loud voice. And we carry on in the Rosh Hashanah Nusach. But now everything goes back to basic, normal, what you'd expect on a Shabbat morning. Baruch Hu, we don't say if we're on our own. This is the first bit. We don't say something if we're davening alone. Just these two lines, Baruch Hu. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying the words, but we only use that particular phrase. Come on, everyone, bless God. So if there's no one else there, it's meaningless. We miss those two words out. And then we carry on with these bits here, and we add in a little poem at this point, which is different, I think, in some books from others. Melech Olam Bo'otzar Chayim. This is the one. Yeah, well, look, you know, it's Melech, isn't it? This is going to be a recurring theme. Every time you see the word Melech, you have to think that is what God is today. And as we said last week, the word king in modern connotations is not really what it used to be, where a king was all powerful. Whatever he said happened. And now we're saying God is the king. What he says goes. No two words about it. And then we have this poem, which we're not going to look at in depth. And then we come to the so before that is Shabbat. We sing the normal song. To whatever tune you like. Then we come to the Shema, the brachot before the Shema. And again, we insert a bit more here. A few more phrases. There's the Shema. Oh, sorry, I want to get to the Shema. I want to get past the Shema. Don't forget, if you're on your own, you add in the word El Melech Ne'eman, God faithful King. If you're not davening with a minyan, and we go straight to the Amida. So now we're at the first day, Rosh Hashanah, morning service, Amida. And again, it's a very simple Amida. It's the same as last night. We mentioned that before. There's a whole introduction here about about how you have to have in your kavanah in your heart and make sure you understand what you're saying. Well, you've got the English, you've got your maksa. Make sure that we know what we're saying. So the Amida here is the same as it was last night, which is great because we don't need to talk about it again. We can fly through to the end, and then we come to the reader's repetition. And now this is where I'm not sure what everyone's going to do. Because really, all these, the reader's repetition, we don't say if we're on our own because we're not repeating the Amida. So everyone will have to make their own decision, and we'll have to go through into the repetition and decide which of the poems that are added in, and there's quite a few of them, especially in Musaf, which of them are they going to say themselves? So here we go, so adding things in. And some of them we know, and some of them we don't know so well. That leads into a poem here by Kalea. Rabbi Elazar Kabir wrote a lot of these added Piyutim poems, which we say on Rosh Hashanah. But we don't have to say any of them. There are things that have been added in over the centuries. They're not part of the original davening. Be your choice. If you've got time and you've got the inclination, then you should say them, look at them, read them, try and make sense of them. If not, please don't feel guilty about missing them out because it's not a problem. So here we go, on and on and on. And this is all. This one here is talks about blowing the shofar, which we're not going to do on the first day. It talks about Yom Teruah, Malchut HaMalchut, God again, Yimloch, all these godly words keep popping up. Let's keep going, please. Now we have this tune here, which you're all familiar with. There's lots of different tunes for it. Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yiloch, Yolam Ba'ed. God is king. God was king. God will be king forever and ever. And there's verse after verse after verse telling the various special stories to do with Rosh Hashanah. And it's, I haven't got the English here, you've got it in your maksa. Spend some time looking at the English in a modern translation. And it's quite interesting. Not overly interesting, but quite interesting. Look here, though, at the Hebrew. And you can see we've got Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Then we say the chorus again. Hashem, Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Imloch, V'olam Va'ed, Do Harei, Dolagim, Yodova Vuvako, Hamonei Amulei Alalu Vako, V'chayalim V'chayod Yivadu Vako. So we're going through the alphabet. Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yud, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samach. Oh, they've made a mistake. Somehow or other, that should be Samach, which is the round letter. But someone didn't know how to spell at one point. And so they've now corrected it, which makes it go a bit wrong. We can pretend that's a Samach. They're interchangeable sometimes. Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, and Taf. So we've run out of space, so we have to repeat Taf, Taf, Taf to fit in with the three-lined poem that every other stanza has got. Okay, so that's that one. So lots of melech bits all added in. Oh my goodness, this is why it makes the service so long. And then we come to the Kedusha. Where do we come to? Oh, yeah, here's the Kedusha, isn't it? Is it? Yes. We don't say that for on our own. The Kedusha, which is in the repetition of the Amida, is a little game, a play between the Chazan and the congregation. He says one thing, congregation say something else, and then everyone says it together. If you're on your own, miss it out. It's not to be said alone. Kedusha, Kaddish, all these things are only for when there's a minyan. So we're carrying on. We're carrying on now with the repetition of the Amida, and that takes us through. Nothing much else happens. We say Bicha HaKohanim only if you're in shul with a minyan. So don't worry about that either. There's B'Sefer HaChaim, we add that phrase in. And then we come to this bit here, Avinu Malkeinu, which you've probably heard of. We say Avinu Malkeinu on every fast day, except for Tisha B'Av. We say it on every one of the 10 days of penitence, the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, except we don't say it on Shabbat. A bit surprisingly, but because of that rule I mentioned earlier, Avinu Malkeinu, which we'll talk about next week, and in fact, I don't need to talk about it next week in depth because Dr. Lieberman is going to be talking about it in one of his shiurim. So he's going to talk about Avinu Malkeinu in more depth. We're not talking about it at all today because we're not saying it on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. But there you've got the word Malkeinu, Melech. It pops up all the time. It's a whole list of requests, so we can't say that on Shabbat. Then we say Hayom Yom, the prayer, the psalm for the day. Every day we have a different psalm, and this year, of course, it's going to be Shabbat. So we go to Shabbat. Here we go. Hayom Yom Shabbat Kodesh, Hayu Hal Yimom Revet HaMikdash. And then we say the psalm, LeDavid Hashem Ori. Remember that one now? Psalm 27, which you should be used to by now. Preceded by shofar blowing during the month of Elul, but not on Rosh Hashanah and not on Shabbat. Okay. Second day we'll have a little look at next week. So now we move to the next part of the service, which is the laning. So now you need to go to in your matzah to find the removing the Torah from the ark. So I'm on page 463. You'll be on wherever you are. And this is one of the central parts of the service, which we can't miss out, even if we are at home. So what are the three central parts? The first thing you have to say is the Shema, with the blessings before it, and there's a couple of blessings after it, followed by the Amida, the silent prayer, although if you're on your own, I don't know why it needs to be silent, but that's the one you concentrate on, the Amida. And the third element that is important to be done when you're on your own, on any occasion, Rosh Hashanah included, is the laning. So we don't lane if we're on our own. When I say we don't lane, that means if we don't get a Sefer Torah out, unless we have one at home, then we should get the Sefer Torah out. We don't say the Baruch Hu. No one gets called up. But the words themselves, you can either read in Hebrew, in English, or you can actually lane them using the laning notes. So you sort of think you are in shul a bit. We're getting here, we're getting here, we're getting here. And let's just see what happens on our laning, the piece we read from the Torah. Hold on, nearly there. So every other festival, just about, we do something quite sensible, which is to read an extract from the Sefer Torah, which talks about that particular festival. So we do that on Pesach, we do it on Shavuot, we do it on Sukkot, and you would have thought that we would do it again on Rosh Hashanah. But if you remember last week in the introduction, we found out that there's only about 3 lines or 4 lines in the Sefer Torah talking about Rosh Hashanah, and that actually doesn't mention the word Rosh Hashanah at all. So the rabbis had to think of something better to make the laning a much more exciting and interesting piece for us all to read. And as you may well remember, over the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, we talk about the story from beginning to end of the Akedah, when Isaac was nearly killed as an offering to God. But of course, we know it didn't happen, which is rather lucky for everybody. And the first day of Rosh Hashanah starts off with the prelude to the main story, which is on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So it talks about the birth of Isaac. Now there's a lot of births going on. We'll come to the second one in a minute when we look at the Haftarah. But this is the birth of Isaac. As we know, it was after Sarah had waited 90 years for a child, and she couldn't have children. And that's quite possibly explained by, for much of her life, she was wandering through lengthy journeys in the desert, and then this happened to her and that happened to her. She didn't have an easy life, and she was unable to have children until she thought it was too late. But miraculously, she gave birth to Isaac. And we talk here about his circumcision. Incidentally, Dr. Liebman just told me that he's just finished doing a Brit Milah this morning. So circumcision started a long, long time ago, as we know, and it's still continuing even today. As you may have read in the paper today, in the Jerusalem Post, there was an article about an emissary from Shaliach from Israel who had a baby 5 months ago, and there was living in New Zealand, there was no one to do the bris. No chance of getting anyone over there because all the airports were closed. They normally get someone from Australia. So in the end, they waited long enough. The father decided he was going to do it himself. Okay, that's what the headline says. But it wasn't quite as bad as that, because he brought in a doctor, because it has to be done by either the father, obviously, or a properly trained moel. You shouldn't really just use an ordinary doctor, but they brought in a doctor, and the doctor helped him, and the father actually just sort of held the knife at the appropriate time, or the blade, or whatever it would be. So that was a nice little story, which ties up with the circumcision, the Brit of Yitzchak. And then we have this rather awful story, really, because Sarah was now happy she's got her child, and if you remember, she had her maidservant Hagar, who had Sarah had told Abraham to have a baby with Hagar, and he did. He listened to her, and they had Ishmael. And Ishmael was perhaps not such a good chap. Obviously, Our commentaries make out that he was a really bad boy. And Sarah got really upset about it because she didn't want her son, Yitzchak, to be influenced by Ishmael. So she told Abraham to send them away. I don't want him. I don't want Hagar here. I don't want my maidservant. And I don't want that boy here. They are bad influences. Get rid of them. And it says in the laning, it actually says, so Abraham, he was mortified about this because it was his wife, his second wife, and it was his son. And here he got Sarah, who he's gone through so much with, telling him to chuck out these two people who he loved very much. What should he do? Well, he thought about it, and I suppose luckily for him, God came to him and gave him a message and said, don't worry, Abraham. Don't think that this is a bad thing. Listen to your wife. Oh my goodness, that famous phrase which has gone through generation after generation. Listen to your wife. Your wife is always right. So that's what God told Abraham, and he did. Abraham said, okay. God said, don't worry about them. I'm going to make them into a nation as well. Although, of course, if they'd have all stayed together, maybe world history would have been completely different, and maybe the Jews and the Arabs would not be still having to make peace. We hope maybe that we will in this coming year. We always hope that it will actually happen. But this was the great separation from the Jews and the Ishmaelites, if you like. Here is where it happened. And then we have the little added tragic story where Hagar was obviously unhappy. One minute she's living a very nice life in a very relatively wealthy family, all her provisions made for, and she was chucked out. And she was given some bread. Abraham gave her a loaf of bread and a flask of water and said, off you go, my dear. Don't want to see you again. Go out into the hot desert and make your own way. Well, she went out, and not surprisingly, it didn't take her long to break down in tears, realizing what was going on and thinking, well, how am I ever going to feed my child and myself for that matter? And the voice of God came, because the boy was crying as well. Ishmael was crying, and the angel called out to Hagar, and he said, what's wrong? Don't worry, because God has heard your boy crying, and all you have to do is get up, go round the corner, and you will find, I'm going to make him into a great nation. Go around the corner, open your eyes, and lo and behold, there's a well, you've got plenty of water, everything will work out. And it did. So they lived in the desert as nomads. Ishmael grew up, and he was a very good huntsman, and they settled in the desert, and his mum found a wife for him from the land of Egypt. And then we end up the laning with a bit of a strange story about Avimelech. We've sort of drifted away from the Akedah and the Yitzhak. We're just parking that for the moment. And Abraham signs a treaty with Avimelech, and to do with wells of water that the slaves of King Abimelech had stolen. There was a whole rumpus about that. But they made up, and they took sheep and cattle, 7 sheep, and they had a pact. And this all happened, of course, in the town of Beersheba, yes, which is where the word 7 comes from. 7 wells, 7 sheep, whatever it was. They planted a tree to mark the occasion, and hopefully there was peace with the Philistines for many years after that. We have to wait till next week, or tomorrow, sorry, we have to wait till the second day of Rosh Hashanah to find out the climax of the story. This sets the scene. That's all it does. We move on to the Maftir. The Maftir is from the second Sefer Torah. We won't have a Sefer Torah if we're at home, let alone 2 Sefer Torah. But it does, this does take us to the extract from the Torah, which mentions the sacrifice that happened on Rosh Hashanah. Short piece on the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month. Yeah, it doesn't say Rosh Hashanah. Remember, we talked about that last week. Mikra Kodesh yeh lachem, kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu. No work will you do. It's a Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah, a day of blowing the shofar, and this is the sacrifice that had to be made in temple times. Very short. We move on to the Haftarah.
Yes, it was just to keep you in the loop, just so you. It was just to show you that I'd changed.
The Haftarah. Yes, we always read a Haftarah, which comes from the book of Nevi'im, from the second part of the Bible. This one is Shemuel, Aleph, Perek Aleph, the beginning of the book of Samuel. And it's a very nice story. You may wonder why they chose this one, but it's all, again, to do with having a baby. And a woman who had difficulty having a baby, Hannah in this case, Hannah. And she, if you remember, went to the temple and she prayed that she would have a baby. And when she was doing her praying, she was doing it silently. And Eli the priest was seated on his chair at the doorway, and she was crying and making her promise that she would give her son to God if she had him. And he thought that she was drunk, because she was speaking in her heart, just like the way we say the Amidah. She was shuffling away, really getting God to listen to her. And he thought that Eli, in charge of the temple, that she was drunk, and he tried to chuck her out. And he said, "No, sir, I am a woman who has got a very heavy heart. I haven't had anything to drink, and I really want to have a baby. And if I do, I'm going to give him to the Lord, so that he will be helping you in
dedicate.
Thank you. That's what happened. So why are we talking about these two children, the birth of Isaac and the birth here in the Haftarah? Well, because Rosh Hashanah, if you remember, one of the things about it is it commemorates the day that the creation, the day that man was created. And so what better to have two births, two difficult births. Well, I don't know if the births themselves were difficult, but it took them a long time. It took the mothers a long time to have the children. And that's what we particularly remember on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, that's the Haftarah. So again, we should say it, we should look at the English and make sure we understand what it means. It's a lovely story. If you read it in the right way, it brings tears to your eyes, because it's a very full story. Now, a lot of the stories in the Bible are truncated, but this goes into great detail, and is worth a read at some time on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. The other thing about when you're davening on your own, of course, you don't have to do everything in one go. If you want to, you can pace yourself. You can do a bit now. You can do the morning service. You can have a gap. You can do the laning later. You can do the Haftarah later. So you don't think you have to spend 2 or 3 hours in one go when you're on your own. There are some benefits of being alone on Rosh Hashanah, or any day really, because you can take it at your own pace. Although the temptation is just to try and follow what goes on in shul. And the rabbis always tell us that the best, if you do have to pray on your own, the best way to do it is in conjunction with the shul. So if the shul starts at 8 o'clock, we should really start at 8 o'clock and try and do it at the same pace that the shul does. So then after the Haftarah, we come to the sounding of the shofar, but we don't, because there is no shofar on the first day. Why? Because of worry about people carrying the shofar to shul. The idea is that if you've the man, the Baal Tekeah, the person who's blowing the shofar, it's bound to happen. He forgets it, he leaves it at home, and he comes to shore and he remembers, oh my gosh, I've left my shofar at home. He runs back home, but because it's Shabbat, and this was in the day before an Eruv, like we have everywhere nowadays in Israel and in many places abroad. So if it was an Eruv, you could carry, but if there's no Eruv, you couldn't carry it. There was no way of getting it to shore. What would happen? He would get absolutely torn to shreds by his congregation. So because of that fear, even though it says in the Torah, you shall blow the shofar, or it doesn't say, but there will be blowings on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. We don't do it because we're worried that Shabbat might be broken. So it's a bit extreme, really, if you think about it. You might have thought a different answer would come up, but no, we have to wait till the second day, Rosh Hashanah. So we'll wait till next week, and then we'll spend some time looking in a bit more detail about the shofar, what it's all about, how it works, what do we do, and what will we do if we are, again, not in shul, because there are going to be some workarounds, and hopefully we'll know a bit more about it, but I think we all get the general idea. So we can talk that through next week, if anyone is going to be interested in following up today's session. How are we doing for time? Now we're going to come to finish, not quite finish, because we have to talk about the afternoon service, to the Musaf service. So let's skip in your book, if you're following in your book, to Musaf, the additional service, first day, which is actually very similar to the additional service.
Paul,
Yes.
Paul, I'm sorry, I've got to go, but thanks very much. It's very interesting. I've got to leave you.
Bye, Joe.
Okay.
Bye.
See you next week. Okay. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Right. So we're now looking at Musaf. This is all shofar. Let's go past the shofar. Afternoon service. Sorry, additional service. We don't normally say it apart from on festivals. Additional. We add it in, because it is in conjunction with the additional offerings that were made in the temple. Because each Amida, it sort of reminds us of the temple services. So this is added in. Musaf, l'hosif, is to add in. And we start off exactly the same way as every other Amida. And on Rosh Hashanah, we add in the Zochreinu l'chaim, and we add in Nichamocha Avarachamim. And then we go Uvachein, remember that? Uvachein, like Esther when she went to see King Achashverosh, Uvachein, and so Uvachein, Uvachein. And we carry on with our Amida, and then everything changes. Everything changes. Rosh Hashanah Amida for Musaf is the longest in the whole year. Normally, the Musaf Amida has only got one central bracha, 3 before, 3 after, so it's only got 7. But today we are adding in 3 extra brachot and lots of words, because here we are coming to the crux of the story, which is hold on, let's just get to it. First of all, we have to be careful that we add in also for Shacharit. There are some bits in brackets where it says for Shabbat, add in the following. Don't forget to watch out for that, Yom HaShabbat. And we then carry on with this. Here we go, Aleinu. Suddenly in the middle of our Musaf Amida, we have Aleinu. Now, Aleinu, L'Shabeach, L'Adon HaKol, you will all be familiar with, because it ends every one of our services. And we say it, we end up with singing the famous little tune. Second, Benema. Oh no, they got different words here. Okay, cancel that. Ends slightly differently in the Nusach Safard. Not here. Okay, so why are we suddenly saying Aleinu in the middle of the service when we are used to saying it at the end? So in fact, it's the other way around, because the prayer started with here. This is the origin of the prayer Aleinu. And we liked it so much that we hopped it from here and stuck it at the end of every one of our services. Okay, it was reputedly written by Yehoshua, long time ago. It's a very ancient prayer, and it's come into our general prayers over the centuries. Why have we got Aleinu here? Well, look, if we look at some of the words, it talks about. Here we go. It starts here. Lifnei Melech Malchei HaMelachim. The King of Kings. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's God. So God is the King, and refers to King in various other places. Emet Malkeinu. Okay, it's all to do with kingship. Also, to point out, at the beginning of Aleinu, in the repetition, we bow down. Do you remember in Shul, we bow down on Rosh Hashanah, and we bow down on Yom Kippur to the ground. And this is the occasion on Rosh Hashanah during Aleinu in Musaf, when we go for Anachnu Korim Mishtachavim Umodim, we bend the knee and we bow down. We used to bow down to the ground a lot. That was in the Jewish religion, but it was taken over by a certain other sect called the Muslims, who do a lot of bowing down to the ground in their mosques, as you all know. And because of that, because it became their rule, we stopped it. The rabbi said, right, we're not doing that anymore. If that's what they want to do, we're not doing it. So the only time we do it is on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then not everyone does. But we have to remember that now, I don't know actually if you're supposed to bow down to the floor when you're on your own. Is that only something you do in shul or not? I haven't found an answer. I will keep looking. I don't know. We will see. So now this is introducing the Musaf Amida, which is really quite interesting, because it goes into 3 different sections. And normally, not on Shabbat, but normally we blow the shofar in between each section. Remember that? During the repetition of the Amida, because there are 3 sections. Now, hopefully I've got something which I prepared earlier, which I can find. Right, so now I've got that. Now I've got this. We can go back into that. And it's going to fail. Lost it. No, I can't do it. Okay. You can look at me for a few minutes. So here we go. So listen to the little story which I found. In fact, it's from the Chabad, who have got a wonderful website. If you ever want to look anything up, okay, we know some of the things we might not necessarily agree with, but they do have very nice website. And they tell us about the Musaf Rosh Hashanah, which contains the 7 blessings. Which contains 9 blessings, doesn't it? Which is the longest Musaf. I mentioned that. Let's go to the 3 sections. The first section is Malchiot, all about God being king. Okay, and Rosh Hashanah commemorates the day that Adam, the first person, was created, and God was crowned king of the universe. And we find in our prayers for Musaf, we have 10 verses that we take from the Bible. And we start with 3 verses from the 3 verses from the Torah. We have 3 verses from the Ketuvim, that's Psalms, and 3 verses from the Nevi'im, that's 9. And then we end up with the 10th verse, which is from the Torah. So each section, Malchiot, kingship. The first one is, we do the same thing. So this is making a note that God is king and master of all the world. Then we have the second section, Zichronot, which is where God, we ask God to remember us, remember each one of his loyal subjects throughout the year. God of mercy, judge us. Remember, remember. And then the third and final section is the shofrot, the shofar. And we choose verses from the Bible which relate to the shofar. So that signifies the coronation of the king, if you remember from last week, and the announcement of various other things that happen, including Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so let's see if I can bring back, using everything now, bring back. What's happened? My goodness, never mind, we're nearly at the end. I've lost my bits. So in the Musaf Amida, that's what you have to look out for, the 3 sections. And as I say, they are separated in the repetition of the Amida by shofar blowings, which we don't do on Shabbat. And some shuls, not ours, even in the silent Amida, split up the 3 sections. The Art Scroll, I'm just reading at your notes. And Neil said the Art Scroll Matzah includes Kabbalat Shabbat. Yeah, but it should be just a very truncated one. I don't know, it shouldn't be everything. So I don't know which Art Scroll Matzah you've got, but does it have everything? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, maybe. I just want to share my screen again. Hold on a second. Yeah, so we're just finishing off now the Musaf Amida, which is the private Amida. As I say, it's split into 3 sections. The verses to do with kingship, the verses to do with remembering, and the verses to do with the shofar. And when you look in your matzah, hopefully you will find the references. Where are they from? Where each verse is from. Quite interesting to see. And if you do look at it on the actual day, you should see that one of them, the last one, doesn't follow that path that I mentioned. Doesn't have 3 Torah, 3 Psalms, and 3 Nevi'im. It goes, I can't remember how it goes, 3, 4, 2, something like that. It's not quite the same. They muck up the system. Now, we also have the repetition. Now, the Musaf repetition of the Musaf, the reader's repetition of the Musaf Amida that's where all the singing happens. And there's loads and loads of them, as we remember, lots of lovely tunes, and that's what makes the day. So your choice what to do with them. They're all there. You can read them. We have also Untitled Chapter, and I think I'm going to leave that. We'll look at that next week because we've got on a long time, we'll look at that next week. Okay, so I'm going to begin to wind down now. We've also got Mincha and a Mincha to look at. Very quickly, just going to go to Mincha, because on Mincha of Shabbat, we have to remember that we, in addition to saying the Amida for Rosh Hashanah, which is the same as the one we did in the evening and in the morning, we also normally, when we're in shul, we do the laning of the following week's sidra. So we have to remember that if we're going to keep to what's going on in shul, we should get out our matzah and find the passage in the afternoon service, which dwells on the following week's laning. Right, I have to stop because I'm getting too hot. So I'd like to ask if anyone's got any thoughts or questions, and I would love to hear them. What we've done so far. Just trying to get to see how long the Musaf Hamida is. Goes on. Hymn of Glory, Anim Zemirot, Mincha, 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 Mincha. Yeah, here's the reading of the law, reading of the Torah. Ha'azinu. Nearly at the end of the Sefer Torah, ladies and gentlemen. So next week, if you're going to come back for more, we're going to look at the following. We're going to look at the bits we missed out, basically, which is the shofar in particular. We're going to look at the laning for the second day, and we're going to look at the Haftarah for the second day. And if we have time, we'll look at some more bits from the Musaf Hamida. And then if we still have time, we can make a start on a background to Yom Kippur. All right. So I think we will draw to a close at this point. Okay, so have a good week. I do need to just stop sharing, and I do need to stop recording. Let's do that now. Recording. Stop recording.